In this video, I want to share with you how I built a double row island and how I attached it to the floor by the use of the new anchor frame and connector rails from Ikea. Now, if you have the previous model of the island support bracket, or you're making some yourself by using some 2x4 and some heavy-duty brackets, or you want the island to be floating, I can recommend you to take a look at one of these videos, which you can find on the playlist with all my kitchen island videos, and there's a link in the description. I have also added a link for the video showing how to build a single row island. So if that's what you're doing, go find that video. This is not it. This is the double row island. Let's get started. The first thing we want to do when we're building an island is to assemble the cabinets, and there's really nothing special about it. The only difference between assembling the cabinets for a single row island and a double row island is where we put that bracket at the top, where we either put on the back panel or connect to the second row of cabinets. But we will get to that in a minute. First, I want to tell you a little bit about the island we're building. It is a double row, since this is the topic of the video, and it only has 4 cabinets, 2 on each side, and the one on the back side, they are shallow. The only special thing about this specific island is that there is a post close to the island, as you can see here, and the client would like the island to be lined up with that post, and the panel sitting up in that corner going right on the side of the post. So that's something I need to take into consideration when I'm deciding where to put the island on the floor. But the procedure for building and installing the island is exactly the same. And now back to that bracket I mentioned before. The bracket is the one that we usually use for hanging cabinets up on the wall. But when we're building an island, we use that bracket now for securing the connector rail. And when we're building a double row island, we put the bracket on the side of the cabinet like we do when we hang it on the wall. That means it is protruding from the cabinet box, not sitting back like when we're doing a single row island. No, it's sticking out. And this is important because when we get to the panels, we do not need to cut those in the depth, since the connector rail is protruding from the cabinet. But I will explain that in great details later on. Before I move on to the next step in this tutorial, I just want to point out that, as you can see here, I'm assembling the cabinets a little bit different than IKEA recommend. And it's because IKEA want you to have it flat on the floor and then kind of put it sideways together. I think that building the cabinet from the ground up, any size of cabinet from the ground up, with putting on the bottom or the top if it's a wall cabinet, and then the back of the cabinet, and then finally the last side of the cabinet. I think that's a much better way of doing it because it's just easier to handle. But of course you can do it any which way you prefer. I'm just slowing down here a bit because I want to tell you that it is important that you put on those 2 white plastic pieces at the bottom of the cabinet, because since the connector will be sitting at the top of this cabinet, we need the same distance at the bottom, and these 2 plastic pieces will do exactly that. With all the cabinets now assembled, it is time to put them on the floor where you want your island. In my case here, as I mentioned in the introduction, I need to have it in a very specific position so it lines up with that post you see at the back. And that's why I'm bringing in the panel, so I can check that this is where I want it. And when the island is in that exact position, I can take some masking tape and put on the floor. It's always a good idea to line up the island with the floor and not so much with the surrounding cabinets. I know that you can measure from the island to the base cabinet sitting on the wall, but what's important is what the eye see. And if you line it up with a wall that is not perpendicular to the floor, or to the lines in the floor, then you will have an island that are not sitting well aligned with the floor. And that's what the eye sees. So that's important. You have to line your cabinets up with the floor. We will do some final adjustment to the position later, but right now you just want it as close to the final position as possible. Now we get to the anchor frame from Ikea. That is the part that will connect the cabinets in the island with the floor. And we need that because otherwise the cabinet have a risk of falling off the legs if you push them sideways. And we don't want that to happen. No. And this item is a new one from Ikea. If you have installed an Ikea kitchen in the past, you would know that Ikea had a different island bracket support system before. So this is new, and this is actually the first time for me that I am installing an island using this anchor frame. In the box, besides screws and brackets, you will find 4 pieces of wood. And with these parts you can build a rectangular frame. It will be about 12 inches wide and up to 84 inches, I think it is, long. And that means if you have an island like I have in this case, that is shorter than 84 inches, you need to cut the 2 long items, and you will see me do that in a second. The picture you see here is from the instruction that comes with the island frame, and that's why there are 3 cabinets and not 2 as I have in this situation. The way it's done here is the way Ikea suggests you're doing it. That means you have legs under the cabinets at both ends, all over. And that means that the frame has to be sitting a bit back from those legs, because you cannot have legs and frame at the same location, obviously. However, I'm that kind of guy who will read the instruction after I did something. So what I did in this case is I thought, well, I want the island anchor frame to be as long as the cabinets, almost, maybe an inch shorter than the 2 cabinets combined. And this is 2 30-inch wide cabinets. So I thought to myself, well, I will make the frame about 59 inches. And that means I had no room for the legs at the back of the cabinet, as you can see here. And I don't think that's a big problem that we have no legs right there, because the cabinets will be resting on the frame as well, which will be secured firmly into the floor. But I gotta tell you, I think you should do as Ikea suggests in this situation and have the frame being so short that you'll have room for legs on the cabinets at the end of them. What you see me doing here is that I'm adding those small legs that come for the anchor frame onto the short pieces of the wood. And you simply do that by screwing the little leg into the nut that is sitting in the wood already, and then you measure, because you want to have about 4.5 inches in the total width of the wood and the leg if you are installing a section cabinet. But if you're installing a method cabinet, then this measurement should be 80 millimeter. Now it's time to cut the length of those 2 long pieces of wood that come with the anchor frame. And as I mentioned before, I decided to cut them just about an inch shorter than the total length of the island. So that's what I'm doing here. I use my handsaw. There's no need to bring in the big guns for such a small cutting job. And remember, if you decided to have 2 legs per cabinet at the end, you need to cut your anchor frame shorter than I'm cutting mine. And how much is that? Well, you have to take one of the cabinets upside down and measure the distance from the side of the cabinet to where that little flat bracket for the leg ends. And then you know how much you have to subtract from the total length of the island. That is the length of your island anchor frame. But remember to subtract the double of that measurement, because you have one at each end. And then take off another 1/2 inch. Now you're ready to put the frame together, and that is fairly easy. You take the screws from the hardware kit that comes with the anchor frame. This is how they look, and then you simply use either the Allen key that also comes with the hardware, or you take an Allen key that fits into your drill and you use that. And then you build a frame. Very simple. Now with the frame put together, we are ready to attach it to the floor. And for doing that, we have 2 options. We can either do it the Ikea way or my way. The difference between these two options is that when we do it the IKEA way, which I will show you first, you level the frame and attach it to the floor completely. If you do it my way, you just put it in position where you want it on the floor, but you don't attach it to the brackets that are holding it to the floor, and you do not level it at this point in time. So the way to do the IKEA way is to put the frame on the floor and securely fasten it to the floor in any way possible. And by that I mean it has to be level, and you need to secure the bracket into the floor and the frame into the bracket. So everything is ready to receive the cabinets. And that means that when you put the cabinets up, you cannot really adjust the cabinets where they're sitting on the frame. So the frame has to be level. And that's what you see me struggling with here. Because the thing is that the frame can be a little bent and twisted. So it's very difficult, especially if you work alone, to get it absolutely level. And this is actually the reason why I decided to do it my way, which you will see when I'm done explaining how IKEA want you to do it. It's also important to check that you have minimum 4.5 inches from the top of the frame down to the floor if you're doing section. If you're doing the method cabinets, that measurement should be 80 millimeters as a minimum. If it's not, you will have to cut into your toe kicks to make them fit under the cabinet. The frame is adjusted up and down by turning on those little legs sitting under the frame. And I find it pretty hilarious that IKEA gave you an Allen key so you can adjust from the top of the frame instead of just taking your fingers and put them on each side of that little leg and then just spin it. I don't know what they were thinking, because I cannot, maybe I'm stupid, but maybe I can really not come up with a situation where you will need to adjust it from the top where you don't have access to put your fingers in there. Maybe it is different on method. I don't know, since it's only 80 millimeters high, but I cannot imagine any situation where you don't, where you're not able to twist that little leg with your fingers. When the frame is super level, it's time to put on the brackets. And now, of course, you need to make sure that the frame is in the correct position. In this case, I marked on the floor, you see there with that green masking tape, where I want the center of the frame to be. And then I want it centered between that piece of tape and the one at the other end. Then I know it will sit in the right position. And I start by putting on the bracket that goes into the floor, so I know that the frame cannot move sideways in any direction. And when that is done, I will just double check that it's still level, and then I can put the screws into the side of the frame. So it is absolutely secured into the floor now. It cannot move, and at this point, it really has to be level, because now you past that point of no return where you can adjust, because when you put your cabinet boxes on top of that frame, it is it. You cannot change the level of those cabinets. And now we're getting to my way. And if you remember what I said just a few minutes before, we just put the frame on the floor where it needs to go, and then we put the brackets on the side of the frame, but we do not secure it to the frame. We just put a screw into the floor. So the frame will be sitting there. It can move up and down when we adjust it, but it cannot move sideways around on the floor. That's what we want to do. At this point in time, we don't need to make sure that it's absolutely perfectly level. We just need to ensure that we got 4.5 inches from the top of the frame down to the floor as a maximum. We check for levelness, but not for perfection. Next point on the agenda is to add the first row of cabinets on top of the anchor frame. And you simply lift them up and then you add the legs if you haven't done that already. As the cabinets in this situation is resting on the frame, We only need legs at the front. When both cabinets has been placed on the anchor frame, we want to tie them together, and we do that in the normal way. We take our clamp, we take our little drill so we can pre-drill, and we add some screws into the side of the cabinet, so these two units are tied together. Before we can put on the connector rail, we need to cut the length of it, and whether you're installing a single row island or a double row island, that is done in the exact same way. So I will reuse that bit explaining how to get the right length from the video I made on the single row island. The purpose of this connector rail is basically just to be able to, for a single row cabinet, secure the back panel to the cabinet, and for a double row island is to be able to connect the two rows of cabinets that are sitting back to back with each other. There's two in a box, and we need only one for each cabinet. The first thing we do is to cut them to length, and here it is important that you cut off the correct end of that rail because they are not symmetrical. And you can see what I'm doing here. I'm checking to see whether we have that hole in the rail lining up with the bracket inside the cabinet, because that's important. And if you cut off the wrong end of that connector rail, you will only have one hole lining up. So try to change it around to see, oh, if I cut off this end of the rail, will the hole for both ends line up? It's very easy. You just need to make sure that you're not cutting off the wrong end. And when the connector rails has been cut to the right length, you simply slide them into the bracket on the back of the cabinet, as you see me doing here. I just want to point out that at that point in time, I have only cut them for the two front row cabinets, not for the back. I could have cut them now and put them in for the back. I don't remember if I simply forgot or if I, for some weird reason, decided, no, I will do that later. And which you will see I'll be doing when the second row of cabinet has been put into place. And with some legs in my hands, I'm ready to put on the second row of cabinets. I attach the legs to the cabinets and lift the cabinets up on top of the anchor frame. And before I get on to screw everything together, I cannot forget to put in that set of connector rails that I forgot in the first place. And putting on your level every now and then is not a bad idea to make sure that this island is actually level. I will check in a bit with my very long level to make sure that the island is how I want it to be. But for now, before I tie the cabinets together, the shorter level will do. And before I'm ready to connect these two rows of cabinets, which are sitting now back to back to each other and into the anchor frame, I need to tie these two cabinets together. Coming up with a way for connecting these two rows together is where I think Ikea, they did not think it through. They provided you with some small screws and some very small nuts that goes on those very small screws, and some plastic spacers, plastic washers, and some metal washers. I'm not certain that there are still metal washers in the back, but the whole idea is that you take that screw, put on that plastic washer and a metal washer, if there is one, plunk it through the hole, through the connector rail at the top, where it goes through in the bracket, and on the other side, you put on another plastic spacer washer and a knot. And then you tighten up these things. The thing is, though, that you need to pay attention to whether the cabinets are aligned well at the end, because if they're not, you might have trouble with the panel situation when you get to that. And we want to do it right. So you want to make sure that those two cabinet ends are flush. What you see me do here is just adding a piece of scrap wood and my clamp, so I make sure that the two ends of this cabinet are flush. And this is something you want to do at both ends of the island. And if it turns out that those cabinets are not the exact same width, You just loosen the screw that is holding these two cabinets together right there, because it's better to have a bit of a gap there in the middle, which you won't see at the back, than the ends are not being flush. And when you're absolutely certain that your cabinet sides are flush at both ends, you can continue putting in those nuts and screws and washers and plastic spacers and whatnot, and tighten it all up at the top of the cabinets. Before I secure the cabinets to the anchor frame, I want to make sure that the cabinets are really sitting tight back to back at the bottom as well. And I do that by adding some 90-degree brackets at the side of the cabinet at the bottom, as you see me doing here. And when those two brackets has been securely fastened to the cabinet, I put on my little clamp and I squeeze it so they come together. And I think that's important, because otherwise there is no other way to get those two cabinets to be sitting really tight back to back until you put some screws from the inside of the bottom of the cabinet into the anchor frame. So that's what I'm doing here. And again, we do that at both ends of the island. And then once again, I do my super meticulous stunt by running around checking that it's level and that it is in the right position. So it's absolutely perfect before I put those big screws through the cabinet into the anchor frame. Because when that is done, the island cannot be moved unless I want to undo something, and I prefer not to. Now we're ready to secure the cabinets to the anchor frame, and the first option is the way Ikea does it. And as you may remember, that the anchor frame is a done deal. It's sitting on the floor where we want it to be, and it's also attached to the brackets. And that means, and it's level, and that means we can simply take those long screws that comes with the anchor frame and measure out where we can put a screw from the inside the cabinet into the anchor frame. If you went along with the second option, it is important now that you adjust those small legs under the frame so the frame is being lifted up under the cabinet, and is also helping to make the cabinets level before you proceed. So there's really nothing difficult about that. I normally put screws a bit differently than Ikea does, because they have some fine drawings where you can see they're going in at an angle at the back, and I don't do that. I simply measure out from the front of the cabinet to where the center of that island frame is, and then I drill a hole from the inside, pre-drill, countersunk, and then I put in one of those long screws. And when I have done one side of the island, I move to the other side and do the exact same thing. And now, before this island is ready for panels, we need to take off those brackets that we put on the side of the cabinets. If you decided to do it my way instead of the Ikea way, there's one more step we need to do before we're ready to put on the panels. And we need to secure the frame to the floor through that bracket on the side, because as you remember, we did not put in those screws. So that's what we're going to do now. But before we get to that, once again, check that your island is completely level. That is important, because the anchor frame we put on the floor was not level. Remember that? It was almost level. We put it up so it sat nicely, but we didn't super check it before we tied it in, because we didn't, right? So now is the time to check that it's level, and then we can move on to put in to those screws under the cabinet. Since that anchor frame will be sitting all the way up under the cabinets, because we put the screws in already through the cabinet bottom into the frame, you just want to make sure that those small legs are extended all the way down to the floor. So check that as well. And if your anchor frame is shorter than the one I have in this specific kitchen, you will also have legs you can adjust at the end of the island. So that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that the island is absolutely level. And when it is, you take some of the screws that come with the anchor frame, the shorter ones, and you put them through the bracket into the anchor frame. Now it is securely fastened as well. So This is a drawing of an island. It's not the specific island we have been installing in this video, but the principles are exactly the same. I'm choosing to show you this one because you will most likely not have a post sitting close to your island, so you need a special arrangement for the panel over there. But as you can see, we have a row of shallow cabinets and we have a row of full depth cabinet. The brown stripes in between I put on so it can illustrate that we have the connector rail sitting between the two rows, right? So that's the starting point. And as I mentioned earlier, I promised to tell you why we have the connector rail protruding from the cabinet and not sitting inside the footprint of the cabinet as we have for a single row island. And the reason for that is that if we let it protrude from the cabinet, the depth of the cabinet with the connector rail will be matching the panels available to us in the America. And I'm not certain about Europe, so you are on your own there, my friends. But in North America, we have the section system, and our panels, they are made so they do not have to be cut in the width. And that means in this case, I can use a 15-inch wide panel and a 25-inch wide panel. That's what they're called. They don't have those measurements, but Ikea call them 15 and 25, even though they are just close to. But they have the right width, so we don't need to cut them, right? So if you're thinking that that's fairly easy, we'll just put the 15-inch on the shallow cabinet and the 25-inch wide panel on the full depth cabinet. We are golden, but no, we're not, because here's the thing. If we do that, these two panels will join where there is no backing behind them. They will simply meet where those two cabinets are meeting, and that's not a great idea because then we have no control over how nice that joint is going to be. If we, on the other hand, take the full depth panel, that means the 25-inch, and put on the shallow cabinet, and we take the 15-inch wide panel and put on the full depth cabinet, these two panels will meet right on the side of the full depth cabinet, and we have a much better way of connecting the cabinet to the panels. And they will be sitting super flat on that side of the cabinet, and you will never have a problem of these panels opening up. And on top of that, it will make the connection between the one row and the other row of cabinets much stronger, because now we are tying them in on the side as well. So that's what you want to do. So because of this super brilliant setup with a connector rail in between, two of them, one of each row of the cabinets, as I said before, we don't have to cut the cabinets in the width, just in the height. And I always let the cabinets run to the floor. So in this case, I'm using panels that are long enough to go from the top of the cabinet down to the floor. And I'm not going to sit here and explain in great details how I will do that, because because it comes clear to you when you see it. There's nothing to it. You simply take the panel you want for that specific location, and then you put it on, and then you mark. You either measure or mark how much you need to cut off, and then you cut it off. I use either a table saw or my track saw, depending on the day. And then I attach the panels from the inside. I always pre-drill with a small drill, which is also countersinking the head of my screws. And in terms of screws, there's two types of screws. I either use the one that comes with the cabinet box itself, if there's any one left, or I use the screws that comes with the panels. Most of the panels comes with 4 or 6 screws, depending on the size of the panel. So use those as well. And remember, always use clamps when you put on panels. Be sure to do a good job. And if you follow these instructions, you will have a kitchen island for a very long time. I can guarantee you that. If you made it this far, I salute you. And here's a few other videos you might find interesting if you are installing your own IKEA kitchen.